Hi, welcome to our workshop on artificial intelligence and academic integrity, AI². We are filming this in February 2023, and recently artificial intelligence in higher education has been in the news. It's been major headlines, including the New York Times article that I'm showing you here, including NPR has had a whole series of articles on AI in higher ed. Inside Higher Ed actually had an article called Freaking Out About ChatGPT Part 1, indicating they're going to do a series of these articles. The Chronicle had a pretty alarming article entitled Will Artificial Intelligence Kill College Writing? And Forbes had an article that came out, Why 2023 Will Be the Year of AI in Education. These headlines can alarm us if we are entrenched in our ways and we've been teaching a certain way and assessing a certain way for a long time. In fact, I recently had a colleague who was just retired, and when I asked them, how's retirement going? Instead of saying, great, I'm enjoying it, he said, I am glad I don't have to deal with ChatGPT. But Bart Everson, my co-presenter, has been proactive in this. He was actually thinking about this issue before we even started seeing these headlines, and so I'm going to turn it over to Bart.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's September, actually, of 2022, I started seeing advertisements for a new product called Jasper. So artificial intelligence that, according to the advertisements, could write for you, could write your blog posts for you. And I was intrigued by that, so I signed up for a free trial, and I had it finish a couple of half-written blog posts that I was working on, and I thought to myself, this is interesting, this is impressive, it's plausibly publishable, the stuff that it's come up with. And then I took about a dozen half-finished short stories that I have been sitting around really for decades, that I'd written such a long time ago. And I fed them all to Jasper. And it completed each one of them just in a snap of a finger, the blink of an eye, in just a moment. And that raised a lot of interesting philosophical questions for me, kind of beyond the scope of this little video. But then I started thinking, what are the implications for teaching and learning? And what would happen if we fed to Jasper an authentic writing assignment from here at Xavier? And since I don't teach myself, I turned to Elizabeth and asked her if she had a writing assignment that we could use.
And so I did have a writing assignment. Last semester, I was teaching health psychology, and we actually formed book clubs, and then they had a midterm paper around their book club. Now, before I kind of real quick show you this assignment, I want to tell you that in our center during COVID, we did a series of workshops about doing authentic assignments, right? And that's kind of code for uncheatable, right? When we were worried about, everybody has access to Google now, and how are we going to assess students? We started looking at authentic assessments. How can you make assessments that are just more specific to your class, more meaningful to students, and that then become uncheatable by Google? And I will tell you, I would have presented this at a workshop as an uncheatable assignment. So the purpose of this was to apply what they've been learning to the book, from their book that they were reading, to what we're covering in class. They had a number of books they could choose from that relate to health psychology, that have been written for lay audience, and then they formed these little book clubs. Then they had to write this paper. And then in the paper, they had to say, what's the book's central argument? What evidence would they use to support this? Okay, that's pretty standard. That could be, quote, cheatable. But it went on and got specific to my course. How did your book support this Walsh article that the whole class is built on? Be specific, use support. Then they had to pick a scientific study cited in their book. They had to look it up, find it, read it, and then critique it. How did the author of the book use the study well now that you've read the primary research? And they had to explain and use appropriate terminology that we talked about in class. Then they had to talk about how the book related to stress, because that's a foundation for the course. They had to think, how would this book affect your future behavior within this area of health psychology that we were talking about? And then what's your main conclusions from the book so far? So for instance, one of the books was called The Nature Fix, and they would read the book and they would apply it to what Walsh said about nature and mental health, and then find a journal article, talk about stress, future behavior, etc. And then there's some content guidelines. And then I had a really clear a rubric that assessed each of the things that I was asking them to do in the task. So I was using a transparent assignment format here. And then I had an academic integrity policy. You cannot discuss this paper with any of your classmates. Okay? Nothing. Anything related to the paper. It's got to be your writing and not your classmates' writing. So this was the assignment that I thought was uncheatable.
So we fed that into Jasper. It was so complex that we actually had to paste it in 2 parts. But once we did that, Jasper generated an essay in just seconds. A complete essay that checked all the boxes. When I took a look at this, I was kind of astonished because I thought, well, it's kind of thin. It's not great writing or anything, but it seems to check all the boxes. This looks like a passable effort. And indeed, when Elizabeth, I should mention, you remember that one of the requirements was to cite or to look at one of the citations from the book itself, to look up one of the articles that was cited and to read it and compare and contrast how that information was used or abused in the book itself. You'll notice the citation that we're calling out here, we just assumed that it was legitimate. As we actually prepared for this workshop and took a deeper look, it appears that Jasper actually made up this citation. It's plausible because it's actually a title that sounds legitimate and is by an author who actually does this kind of work. But we haven't been able to verify that this specific citation actually, this specific article actually exists anywhere. But overlooking that important fact for a moment, when we compared it to the rubric, we found that it checked all the boxes and was a passable grade, maybe a C-. So not great work, but passable. And when I conferred with my colleagues here at the center, we concluded that this product would be very tempting to for certain students to actually pay the fee and subscribe to Jasper, that it would be a tempting thing. So we knew we had to do a workshop on this. And even so, we knew this was going to blow up, but we didn't know exactly how, and we didn't see what was coming just a few weeks later. Kind of all my life, I've been raised on the idea in science fiction, books, novels, short stories, and movies that artificial intelligence is something that's coming down the pike someday. But of course, it's already here, as this makes clear. Even before this, it's already all around us. And maybe you can take a few moments to think about how artificial intelligence is already all around you right now. You can think of your GPS mapping systems, assistants that we have like Siri and Alexa and Google Assistant. In social media, we hear a lot about the algorithm. Well, that's artificial intelligence, of course. Online ads, smart cars, smart homes, different recommenders like Netflix and Spotify. You like this movie, you like this music. The autocomplete that we see in our email and our text messages and so forth, the predictive text, facial recognition. Your banks are definitely using artificial intelligence to try to protect you and protect their money. Even our learning management system, Brightspace, has some artificial intelligence built into it. So it's all around us already, but that's not to dismiss the fact that we have now reached a kind of crucial historical moment. Well, it raises a lot of profound questions, maybe disturbing questions, where we might feel kind of awkward and exposed. And what exactly is that? What exactly has happened? Well, what's really brought it to a head is what happened on November 30th, 2022. And that's when OpenAI launched the free preview of ChatGPT. So that's not Jasper exactly. We'll come back to that in a moment. And I have here in my notes in capital letters to explain what it is before I get into any of the essential background details. What is ChatGPT? Well, it's some software that's trained on a massive quantity of text to try to mimic human writing. And we'll come back to that massive quantity of text. They call it GPT. That stands for Generalized Pre-trained Transformer. It should not be confused with artificial general intelligence, which is just an attempt to mimic human intelligence. Instead, this just tries to predict what's the next word in a sequence. So it's generalized only in the sense that it's not specific to a particular subject matter. It can write about anything. It's pre-trained. They feed this text to it and train it to use that text, and they train it multiple times, and it's very expensive to do that, by the way. And it's a transformer. That's the actual particular kind of model, linguistic model, or the software architecture. And also we should notice GPT-3. By the time that we've come out with this workshop, it's actually GPT 3.5 is the current number. So this is a sequence of versions that are rapidly coming out, each one better than the one before. And this is brought to you by the folks at OpenAI. And it's worth taking a moment just to understand the historical background that OpenAI was started as a nonprofit in 2015 in San Francisco. They've since overcome the limitations of the nonprofit model and accepted billions of dollars from Microsoft. And Microsoft now, the name OpenAI comes from the idea that this was an open software project, open source. And GPT-2 was an open source product. Now that they've accepted all this funding and gone to a for-profit model, GPT-3 is licensed exclusively to Microsoft. And many other things that we could talk about at length. But as we've mentioned, there's been a huge infusion, a huge investment of money. And merely to train the software on this massive amount of text costs, we've heard, as much as $4 million every time they train it, and they do that once a week. So why, you may ask, would OpenAI offer this incredibly expensive technology as a free preview? You may well ask. We don't have the answers for that, but I hope that that's one thing that you think about after you get through this video. We also wanted to come back to this idea of a massive amount of text that the AI is trained upon. There's various conflicting reports, but one of the best, most reliable analyses that I've seen says that they've trained GPT-3 on 45 terabytes of text. And if you're familiar with measurements of data, that is a truly massive amount. Usually when I see terabytes of data, I'm thinking about video, but this is text. Text doesn't take up much room at all. So this is a massive amount, includes huge swaths of text that are out on the World Wide Web, including especially text that's been linked to from Reddit multiple times. A huge number of books, but not just any books. These are particular books that are actually have been published on the open internet. And so it raised a lot of questions and a lot of limitations actually in terms of what books have been fed in here. And also lots of articles from Wikipedia. Well, that gives you a basic background, a very tip of the iceberg background. What ChatGPT is, what artificial intelligence is. Jasper, we mentioned earlier, is just one example. ChatGPT is another, kind of provides a front end to this complex technology. What do we do about it? That's the burning question. What do those of us in higher education, in particular those who use writing in their teaching as a form of assessment, which covers a lot of professors in academia today, is using an AI even count as plagiarism? Is it cheating? A lot of people who've thought about this have said that we don't need to immediately adjust our honor codes here in higher education, that this is already covered because most of the honor codes specify that you have to do the work yourself. So we also might be tempted to move immediately to detection. How can we detect that what our student has submitted is actually written by an AI? And indeed, the example that we showed earlier, written by Jasper, which uses GPT technology. We were able to feed it to one of these early detectors, the GPT-2 output detector demo, and it flagged this as 99.95% fake. However, we think that detection is a red herring for a number of reasons. I've heard it described as an arms race that nobody can win, because just as soon as we get a detector that's reliable, the artificial intelligence is going to be upgraded and it's going to get better at what it does. And the most obvious flags that flag a text as generated by an AI are going to be corrected for. And so what is detectable today may not be detectable tomorrow. But of course, there's so much more to it than that.
The other problem or issue that can arise from just focusing on detection is it can actually erode any rapport that you've built with your students. Just by total surveillance and clamping down and always looking for cheating, you can get kind of focused on that as a teacher and less on the learning that's happening in your classroom. So it can really erode a rapport that's really necessary for student motivation and learning. So right now, and again, recommendations of what to do are just starting because we're just dealing with this issue, and so there will be a lot more coming in. But right now, what people are saying is at the very least, you should probably add a line to your syllabus, and maybe this is something you want to think about as a department. Okay, how this would look. Oh, thank you. Sorry about the slide. There we go. Add a line to your syllabus. It could be that, again, maybe you want to do this as a department, but is it considered cheating in your course? If so, be explicit about that in your syllabus. Will you be looking for it? Will you be trying to detect it? If so, be clear about that. Could you use it like some people use Turnitin, where Turnitin has the originality reports? But I let my student look at their originality reports and then see how it goes. And then they can edit and they can build from that. Like, what are your thoughts on this in terms of the philosophy of your course? Maybe it's time to think about for your syllabus having an AI policy and what would that look like for you? But maybe it's time to kind of update that for you. And then proactively raise this topic with your students and raise it early in class. It's just funny. Like, I was talking to a faculty member just the other day, and he's a little scared to mention this to students because maybe they don't know about it, and so now he'll introduce them to it. And if we know about it, the students know about it, right? So talk with them about it. Talk with them about this. Be very proactive with them, and this is going to become part of their education, just like back in the day, we didn't have Google, right? And so, or Wikipedia, or fill in the blank, spell check. And now they have these tools, and this is another tool students have, so we're going to have to talk to them about it. And that brings me to what I think is maybe one of the most important things to think about now. And this is updating and changing assignments and taking new approaches. We have to recognize this tool exists, and we have to adapt to it. And here, I think it's about clarifying objectives. Okay, clarifying our objectives. This is a great opportunity and point in time for us as instructors to think about what are the real objectives for this assessment or this assignment or this course. What is the real objective and what do we value here? And then have this work using backwards design, starting with your objectives, then work your way into how are we going to make assignments that then can be authentic, that we can use. That's called backwards design, and I think we're going to have to do it. My fear is that a lot of faculty might be reactive and like, oh, I can't now have any writing outside of class, so we're just going to write in class and then do that. Okay, that's letting the assessment drive the objective. That's driving what students will learn and how they learn. So instead, take a moment, take a breath, and think about backwards design. Are there new, what's your real objective? What's your real value? And then how are we going to have a new approach to deal with this? And there's starting to be some examples of things that are coming out there, like having students write prompts that they actually feed into these artificial intelligence agents and softwares and then see what they get back, or having students, and so they create the prompts, or having really good prompts and then have students critique what they get back and improve what they get back. We're going to have to start thinking about this because this is reality.
That's right. We might indeed find more faculty actually using AI in student assignments. However, you should be aware, certainly, that ChatGPT is not going to be free forever, and that what OpenAI is doing with that right now is collecting data from how people interact with the AI in order to improve their commercial product. So is that something that you want to assign your students to? It bears thinking about. We did also want to mention the inner value of writing. Something that I've found as I cherish the act of writing because it allows me to organize my thoughts. I find when I engage in that process, I learn so much about the topic, whether somebody else reads it or not. If we're focused entirely on the end product, we may miss the inner value of writing. And if that's true as teachers, and that's true for our students as well. If we would do a disservice if we didn't call attention for our students to realize the immense value that writing has for their inner life. But mainly, this was an excuse for me to show you this artwork, which was created by an AI, and in fact, it's based on a sketch that I did back in 1991. So you see that artificial intelligence isn't just limited to writing, but there's all kinds of other creative programs and applications that are swarming on the internet right now. This is another piece of art generated by an AI. And I put it here to remind us that AI is here. This is our new reality. The future is here now. And not only is it here now, but undoubtedly it will evolve. And what we're seeing today will look clumsy by comparison to what comes out tomorrow. And it raises many, many concerns. We're not trying to say in this workshop that AI is the bane of our existence, nor is it a savior. So we have a nuanced perspective, and we encourage you to have that critical perspective as well. And while I was working on this workshop, it bears mentioning I actually got some spam advertising a virtual teaching assistant. Yes, an AI that can help you teaching your classes. So if this is a real life in-person workshop, we would have a discussion session now. we know that we don't have all the answers. We've barely touched on some of the questions. And since it's not, we'll just direct you to our wiki, where we've compiled a few resources for further exploration. So thanks for your time. Thanks for your attention. And we look forward to talking with you about all the issues that this is going to continue to raise in the future.